party.
Hi, I'm Hey Dan. What you just heard was my remix of Beyonce's track Naughty Girl. If you want to listen to the full thing, then there will be a link in this area which will take you to Blanc's YouTube channel where the song was featured. I imagine that some of you that are watching this already knew that, but for anyone that's new to the channel, I'm Dan. This is my YouTube channel and this is where I make music. I mix music as well. I'm a DJ and a producer, and I like to show people what I'm working on at the time. So this track came out a month ago as a free download, so you can also download it for free if you'd like it and want to play it in your sets, or if you just want to listen to it, then by all means go download it. There is a download gate on it, so you do have to follow a couple of SoundCloud accounts, but I think that's fine for a free track that someone spent hours on, if not days, sometimes even weeks. People spend a lot of time making music, so giving them a follow's the least you can do. With that in mind, if you enjoy this video, go subscribe to my channel as well, then you'll never miss anything that I post. I upload new mixes every month, tech house mixes and house mixes. I show walkthroughs like this of songs that I've released, stuff that you can easily like take bits from and learn from, and I also show start to finishes of me making songs. So if anything of that tickles your fancy, then yeah, I think this will be a good YouTube channel for you. Anyway, so I've got the track open here in Ableton. As you can see, it's nicely organized, as all my project files usually are. I will break down the track from each group. So we've got low end drums, fills, percussion, vocals, music, FX, and then we'll take a deeper dive into what each one's doing. So I've just soloed the low end, and then we can check out the kick, the double kick, the sub bass and the bass, which is all inside this group that has a bit of processing on it. So you can hear there that the bass it changes over time, and that's kind of what the foundation of this track is. There's not actually a lot of musical elements happening in this track other than the kick and the bass. That's what, and obviously the vocal, but that's the main fundamental of the track. Everything revolves around this bass line. I'll get into that shortly. Just have a quick look at the kick. If I turn everything off, you'll hear what the original kick sounded like. And then let's go through. So the first EQ, kind of cleaning up the sound, getting rid of parts that I didn't like, getting rid of the high end. Then some drum buses being added, which is also getting rid of even more of the transients, giving it some saturation and a bit of boom in the key of D, which is the key of the track. Then we've got some glue compression, utility and more EQ. So the glue compressor is not actually doing much. I think it's being used basically as a limiter, but we're also using the dry and wet knob just to kind of parallel compress it. Then I'm bringing the volume down again. Don't remember why, but whatever. More EQ, more EQ, more compression, and then a final bit of EQ. Looking at this, it's baffling me how much EQ I've done to this. I think nowadays, even though, how long ago did I make this? I think I made this like 2 months ago, if not 3 months ago. And now I would never put this amount of effects onto a kick. I'd just go and find a different kick. Yeah, I think this is a bit of overkill. But I mean, that's how I got the kick. Next is a double kick layer, which I believe is just the same stuff, of maybe a bit, slightly different EQ happening. And basically this kind of just hits every now and then in between kicks. Now I'm going to talk about the bass before I talk about the sub bass, because the sub bass, I believe, is just the same bass, only we've EQ'd it out. And if we take a look here at this EQ, you can see that I'm cutting out the lows of this bass and then I'm cutting out the highs of this bass, and I'll talk about that in a second, but let's have a look at the main bass first. If I turn everything off, we can have a look at the silent patch. If you've got silent, you'll be happy to know this is based off of one of the initial presets. This bass, let's have a look at what it's made of. We've got two oscillators. One's a saw, one's a saw and one's a sawtooth. Sorry, a triangle. Both an octave down, volume all the way up on that one. The triangle is a bit less volume. Then we are cutting them off, and we're using some modulation on the cutoff as well, using the ADSR, which is creating that kind of that punch to it. If I turn that off, you can barely hear it. So what this is doing is it's automating the cutoff very quickly based off of the punchiness of the sounds. The ADSR settings are doing. I don't think these are doing anything. Velocity is more or less the same across the notes, so that's not going to be doing much, but it is technically doing something to the cutoff. Mod wheel, I don't even think I use that. No, but the mod wheel is affecting the resonance. But yeah, I don't modify that in the track. I don't automate that in the track at all, so that's fine. And yeah, then there's also a filter envelope happening, a cutoff filter. And that really is, I think, the main element of the track. In certain points, it goes crazy with that automation. So if we actually look at it and close that for now, we'll come back to that because there's still a little bit more I want to talk about with this. But yeah, that's the automation. As you can see, it goes a bit mental over here, but that's what I like about it. Wow. You get those really nice bass shots, but it's still being done with the same bass, so it's keeping things consistent rather than having to add in additive bass sounds with different things. I felt this was just cool, and I really liked it. And it was fun to mess around with too. It was fun to work out at what point do we need these elements to happen, and what we can do, you know, with the rest of the track. Like I'm cutting the drums out completely when it hits here. Sounds a bit odd, but I've still got all the processing turned off, so that's why. That's one of the main things with this track, is automating the envelope to get this kind of electro-y house feel. There's some effects happening inside of Silent too. If I turn all these off, you're gonna hear a completely different bass melody now. The arpeggiator feature in Silent is great, and that's what is giving this track its flavour. If I turn this back on, we've got all the effects happening to the arpeggiator. So on certain notes, this is when these notes are actually changing. The longer notes are going to play out more with these transpose settings. So you can see it's going up 12 semitones, then 9, and then it goes down 5 semitones, then back up to 10, and that's what's giving it more melody. And then we've got the time set to 1/16. The gates, also how like punchy the arpeggiator is. So the lower the gate gets, the tighter it sounds. And the swing is also a big part of this as well. So if we turn it off, it's quite boring, but the higher this gets, it gets a lot, well, better. So yeah, this is a major part of this sound, the arpeggiator, because it's modifying this really. It's kind of a lazy way of doing it, but it saved time and it got this nice effect to it. Because if I wanted to accomplish this effect, but I didn't have the arpeggiator, say I'm using, I don't know, a plugin that doesn't have that, then what I would have had to have done instead to get that same effect is just go in and to the piano roll and then start working out what the notes are and when. So we know one was 12 semitones, and then I think the other one was 9. So it's something like that. But obviously finding the right points, and because there's swing to it as well, you're going to have to move things off the grid and stuff like that. So that feature made it very easy for me to create this sound basically. I forgot what other effects were on this now I've turned them off. I think there was distortion being applied to it. EQ. Yeah, I can't compression maybe. I think that was it. I'm not sure now, but to be honest, I think these were the same settings that this preset came in. So I didn't really change them much. It was just the arpeggiator changed, getting the notes right. That's it really. I think I changed some of the ADSR settings as to my liking, to my taste. But yeah, that's the bass. Now, the more processing that's happening to it. So we have kickstart, which is to obviously sidechain it. Then some EQ. Some saturation. Ozone Imager. Now, the reason I'm doing this is to kind of give it some stereo width. Because I'm not using this as a sub bass, I can push it a bit wider, and that just helps with the stereo imaging and making it sound a bit cooler. Then I've got some mid-side EQ, so that's EQ in the middle sound, so the mono sound, and then the stereo sound separately. It's quite messy there, so that helps with this again, gets rid of any of the lows that might be playing up being in stereo. Compressor, just to catch any of the loud parts happening, which does happen when the filter opens up. And then Endless Smile is used as an effect in places like this. So that's the bass, that's the main part of this track. What I did, because I wanted this to be a bit wider, that's why I've then used the sub bass as a separate layer to the track. And it is still the same preset, but I did change the arpeggiator so it doesn't jump up so much with the notes, because I wanted the bass to obviously be quite sub-er, so I need that to be playing lower notes. I've obviously turned off the cutoff as well, because again, I don't need that here. I just need those low notes. Pretty much the same other than the arpeggiator. Then we've got kickstart, saturator, EQ, utility, more EQ. Nothing fancy, just making the sound work basically. As you can see on the group of this, there is a bit more EQing happening. So there's a glue compressor to glue everything in this area together, so that's bringing the kick and the bass more in line with one another. There's some EQ, and then there's this EQ as well, which is being automated at certain points, so like cutting the bass out of the kick and then being brought back in at the main drop. So yeah, these aren't doing much. It's just very, very subtle differences, but I needed improvement. And yeah, that's the main fundamental of the track, the kick and the bass, as it is in all tech house tracks. Next is the drums. Play this version over here as well, because we've got another ride happening. And yeah, it's built of everything that you would expect in a tech house track. So we've got claps, open hat, shaker, closed hat, tambourine, ride. There's a snare in here for snare rolls, and then there's 909 ride as well, which again is just adding, I know we've got two rides, but this 909 one helps add some more energy to the final drop. We've got those going into a room reverb, so I'll just turn that off, and then you can hear the dry. And yeah, let's break this down a bit. So claps is built of 3 layers. Yeah, and then we've got EQ happening on each individual sound. We've got some ozone imaging happening on one of the sounds to make it wider, and then more EQ on the third sound. And then we've got the final kind of group processing with EQ, glue compressor, utility, saturation. Tell you what, I've just remembered what's happening here. So this project was so long ago, I just completely forgot that limiters existed. And what these two things are doing is I'm bumping the makeup all the way up and putting soft clip on. So that's then clipping the sound. So we're like all the transients are getting like destroyed basically. And then because I'm up 17 and bringing it back down 16, you don't have to do it this way. This was a really old way of doing it. Basically a limiter will just do the same thing. Saturation, again, it's quite heavy, all this stuff. 15 dB of saturation and then bringing it back down is quite hardcore. And then we've got the mid-side EQ happening again, shape the sound even further. So if we take all this off, put it back on, we get that quite distorted sounding clap that you hear in a lot of tech house tracks. Next, the open hat, it's just one layer. So I've added some reverb to kind of give it some more stereo width. EQing it. This utility is just to automate it in certain parts, and then EQ at the end, which is getting rid of some of the resonating sounds. Just to clean it up a little bit. Next, we've got the shaker. Nothing fancy going on here. We've got a compressor that's compressing it to the open hi-hat. So basically, whenever the open hi-hat is hitting and the transient's coming through, this will get ducked. Just because I didn't want them both playing at the same time, because then it's adding too much into the high end and causing issues. So that's what this compressor's doing. And then the EQ, as you'd expect. Closed hat. Some nice shots here and there. Sounds more like a shaker, to be honest. The tambourine. This is just adding texture to it, really. And we're also panning it from the left ear to the right ear. On their own, these all sound quite weird when you think about it being on their own, but in the context of them all being together, they all gel together and work together, and that's what makes the groove work. Then we've got rides, so we've got 2 layers to the ride. And then a super high version, which is, I think, the same sample pitched up 12 semitones, just to get us those frequencies that I was missing in the track. Yeah, kickstart EQ, and then in the group as well, I'm adding some drum bus to saturate the sound. Throughout the track, it's at 0 dB, and then on the final drop, I am bumping it up 4 dB to make it more impactful. EQ as normal, getting rid of them resonating frequencies, as I mentioned before. The snare. So because the snare is in this group has got EQ on it that's getting rid of the lows, so it's quite weak really, but it didn't really need to be strong in terms of having some lows or mid lows. So we've got some EQ on it again, shaping the sound. The utilities doing the fading effect. Endless Miles adding this effect fit in the air, which is basically just reverb. Kickstart, obviously sidechaining it. Yeah, and that works for the build-up. Then the 909 hat, which is just a sample. I use this quite a lot on my tracks. In terms of processing it, we've got some auto pan on it, which is moving it from left to right. Some very harsh EQ going on. This utility, bringing the sound of it down as the track's starting to fade out. And then some more EQ, which is getting rid of frequencies I didn't like. Yeah, let's talk about the fills as well. Same colour, so why not? So yeah, it's just 2 different fill samples. And yeah, there's not a lot to talk about here. It's just some simple EQ happening. And that's it. That's all I felt it needed for drops. So on the actual bus, we've got some effects happening as well. Again, nothing major. EQ, drum bus, adding saturation, more EQ, mid-side EQ. Spectrum was there to listen to see the frequencies. Make sure we didn't have gaps anywhere in the spectrum or like really high resonating frequencies. And yeah, so one thing that I like to do with my tracks is I like to have what I call a room reverb. Basically, I have the drums going into that, I have the percussion going into that, no vocals, some of the music elements are going in, well, same music elements, basically the sample from the original track, and the effects aren't going into it, but all it is it's a reverb, all 100% wet, and then EQing out the lows that I didn't need. And yeah, so if we were to listen to this now, you'll hear, let's solo the drums, and then you can hear just how the drums sound in this reverb. So the idea of it is to sound like if you were a drummer and you're playing in a different room, then you're going to get this different sound based on the room you're in, because the sound's bouncing off the room, and that happens everywhere. So adding this kind of room reverb makes the track feel a bit more natural. These drums, especially over here, are quite dry. Adding that to it gives it a bit more, like I said before, that kind of real sound to it. I like to apply that to drums, percussion, sometimes the vocals and certain elements, and then it also helps the track feel like it's more together. So that's why I do this. And like I said before, we've got percussion going into it as well, and it's a nice layer to have that goes with the rest of the track. So yeah, let's move on to the percussion. So let's hear everything in this bit. So it's basically just snares and sticks hitting. Nothing fancy really in this percussion groove. I think it's the same throughout. It's just that maybe certain parts change depending on when it was needed. Been very lazy here because I've not even EQ'd any of the layers on their own. I've then EQ'd, and yeah, I'm just removing the lows. Didn't feel like there was much EQ needed for these. They're already very good samples, so we've just getting rid of the low end of the snares that we didn't need. That effect I told you about before, where I'm basically just limiting it, but I did it this way for whatever reason, and then kickstart to make it glue with the kick. And yeah, that's the percussion. And like I said, we've got it going into the reverb. Not at 100% either. I should have mentioned that with the drums. The more you put in, obviously the louder the sound's going to get. So we don't want that. So we're doing -15 for the percussion. That's going into the reverb. And yeah, that's the percussion. So I'll play the percussion and drums together so you can hear how everything gels, and we'll also stick the reverb on. One thing you're going to hear in a minute when we get to the music side of things is the percussion here that I've added is very minimal, and the reason is because there is percussion within the original Beyonce track that I've sampled, so it didn't need much. So if you're thinking that's very boring in terms of percussion, wait until we get to the music bit, and then that will also add to the percussion and the groove of the track. Next up, we've got the vocals. Now, I wanted this track to be heavily based around the chorus of the track. I wasn't too keen on having, like all the verses play throughout or anything like that. I didn't want it to be very poppy in a way, using the full vocal. I wanted to just pick out parts, cut things up, recreate certain aspects with different effects, and just mainly use the chorus for the track, and that's what I've done. We've got everything inside this vocal bus, our vocal group, which is just EQing and compression, nothing major. And then I've split things up, even though it's kind of the same sample, I've split things up into different layers to just kind of keep it tidy. And I know certain parts have different effects on them. That is the main reason. You could really put some of these effects onto the vocal chain here to kind of save some CPU, and if your computer's not hacking it, but my computer was fine, so I've just kept it all into different bits. So let's have a listen to certain parts. Yeah, very, very dry. I wanted it to be dry at this point because it works nicely with it kind of sucking back in. Once that vocal's done, it sucks back into the drums. So if we play it all together here, it's like it comes in and then it's gone again, and then that works very well for the intro. I know you want my body tonight, and I came to party. Is that the original? I'll be your naughty girl. Yeah, so that's how I've cut it. I felt that them two parts, even though that these two parts happen in completely different parts of the track. I know you want my body tonight. I'll be your naughty girl. I see you look me, and I came to party. There you go. So we've got this bit here. I know you want my body, and I came to party. And this bit here, and even though they're not together in the track, cutting them up there at that point, because they follow the same kind of, the vocal melody follows the same pattern, it works very nicely putting these two parts together, and it made sense. I know you want my body tonight, and I came to party. That vocal together makes sense, so that's why that works out, and then that actually becomes something later on in the track as it builds. Baby, the minute I feel your energy, the vibe is just taking over me. I start feeling so crazy, babe. Tonight, I'll be your naughty girl. I'm calling all my girls. We're gonna turn this party out. I know you want my body tonight. And yeah, so the vocal, I can't remember where I got it from, found it online. The vocal itself, I believe, was quite professional. I can't remember if it sounded like it was, you know, one of them ones that's created from some AI cutting it out of the original instrumental, and you know, sometimes you can still hear the instrumental in the back. So I didn't have to do much in terms of EQing any sounds out, or, you know, like cutting the breaths out and everything. It sounded very professional from the get-go, which is always a good thing, so you're not having to piss about cutting things out that you don't need. Having said that, there is quite a bit of processing happening to it, so let's hear it as I turn things on.
Baby, the minute I feel your energy, the vibe is just taking over me. I start feeling so crazy, babe. Lately, I feel the fun coming over me. I don't know what's gotten into me. The rhythm's got me feeling so crazy, babe. Tonight, I'll be your naughty girl.
So a lot of these did actually nothing. There's 2 auto filters on it, but I don't think one's doing anything. I think it's just been left there. Echo Boy, I'm not even sure if that's doing anything. Yeah, so that's being used on the build up. Kickstart, which just helps it glue with the kick.
Baby, the minute I feel your
It's not too harsh. Well, it's 70%, but as soon as you start bringing this down a little bit, the side chain effect kind of goes completely away. This glue compressor, again, is limiting the track, but whatever. Endless Smile, that's going to be filtering with this up here. Utility fades out. Auto filter, it fades in. So these are more effects for kind of like the creative part of the track, so I wanted it to fade in at this point if we play the whole thing together. And then as it goes on. So yeah, those kind of effects help with transitions, but in terms of the actual sound and EQing it, there's not a lot really going on. The compressor's there to catch any of the peaks when it gets a bit too loud. The EQ, the EQ overrides the mid and side mode, again, getting rid of what we didn't need. And yeah, that's the main vocal. Then we've got this bit here, which is quite cool. So if we turn all this stuff off, just experimenting really, and that's how I ended up coming up with what I've ended up with. Let's listen to it without any of the effects on it. So with all this stuff on it, that reverb makes it sound quite mysterious, makes it sound mysterious. Then we've got Echo Boy as well, which is adding some. Adding a lot of echo to it. Don't think you notice it that much because of the kickstart, and especially with this trick with the auto pan filter. So this is basically every 1/16 kind of turning it into like a stutter effect. And then we have Pancake on it as well, which is a free plugin, which is moving it from the left and the right of speaker. And yeah, this is a nice way to experiment with vocals, find a certain part, and you know, I think the go-to for a lot of people sometimes is to just cut it up and, you know, create a vocal chop kind of melody out of it. I mean, I do that too, but in this case, I wanted to try something different, and because of that original sound, I thought, oh, that's quite nice. Let's try this effect with it, and this is what I ended up coming up with. Next up, so again, that's still using this area here, this part, but obviously without the stutter effect, and we're filtering it up. What I'm doing here is I've actually clipped a certain part and it's just repeating. And then it's fading out whilst the main vocal is playing. You don't notice it as much, you know how it's going da 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 da. It's like, because it's not a natural, it's not someone holding the note naturally, it's been clipped. You're getting that da 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 sound. But in the context of the song, you can barely hear that, and it does sound like she's holding the note. It sounds as if she's actually recorded that in, which is cool. And with the filter effect, it helped with this transition. And then the last layer of the vocals is just some additive shots that I just liked, and it fitted well with parts of the vocal.
I'll be your naughty girl. I'm calling all my girls. We're gonna turn this party out. I know you want my back.
I've just heard as well, here we go, you can hear the backing track in this.
I'll be your naughty girl. I'm calling all my girls.
You can hear the string sound, but yeah, so obviously this isn't a super clean a cappella, but it was good enough. And yeah, there's no processing on that at all. It's going into the broom reverb, and there is a delay reverb as well. So if we play this, I think there's a couple of things going into this. I'm not certain, but the benefit of doing it this way instead of sticking the delay onto this channel is we're not losing the dry signal. So if we play it now, let's do it on this hey. If I was to copy this over, turn this down, to get that effect, we're 50% wet, but that also means we're 50% less dry. So that's taken away from the punchiness of the original sound. So if we made that 100% wet, you see how it's delayed, because this sound isn't coming through anymore. Only the delay is coming through. So using a bus fixes that issue. We're getting the full dry signal there, but we're also getting the delay in this part here, which is what I wanted. And yeah, those are being used across the track in the parts where it made sense. And then on the group itself, EQ, and is that working?
It's just taking over me. I start feeling so crazy.
I can't remember if that was there or not. I might have turned it off before. I've got a feeling it was turned off. I ended up not using it. And yeah, they're the vocals. Okay, so the next cool bit about the track is I found... I can't remember if I found an instrumental version of the track or I just clipped up the original. I think I just clipped up the original. Oh, there we go, instrumental. So I found the track on YouTube, just downloaded it and then started clipping it up. And as I said earlier as well, this adds to the percussion. Let's start at the beginning. We've got this kind of string stab. Nothing happening major here other than some EQ and a kickstart, because I didn't like that pluck that's happening. We completely get rid of it there, and we're getting rid of the kick as well. So there's that. Then we've got this sound. What are you? Oh, so that's kind of like the guitar. And yeah, I just kind of liked this bit. It's like a click, but it's also got the guitar in there as well. And like I said earlier, I keep saying like I said, that added to the percussion. EQ and kickstart again. This didn't even get used. What was this? Okay, this wasn't part of the original track, but I did like the sound of it, and then I just cut it up, transposed it down to match the melody, but that didn't make it in the end. So in this group there's a couple more things happening. So we've got the string, like I mentioned, then we've got this. That is this, but there's a different part of it in the track, and EQ'd this one differently just so it stood out more and cut out that bit there. So even though this technically is all in this sample, I've trimmed it and then I've took it out, put it on its own layer, and then added effects differently to that to kind of make it a bit more unique. So yeah, EQ, kickstart, OTT. Let's hear it without the OTT. what it's doing, because it's compressing very heavily, it's bringing out some of the extra sounds in the background. Now, to be honest, listening to it without it, it didn't really need that, but at the time I think I felt like I must have liked it. There's some white noise in there that I seem to have liked, but whatever. I think if I was to do this now, I'd just take that off. EQ, utility, and all the utility is doing is turning it into mono, just to make sure that there is no stereo happening. Yeah, and then there's this bit down here, which is going to be the, don't know what you call it. And as you can see, I've consolidated this. So I think what I had before is I trimmed it all up, got rid of them bits that I didn't need, consolidated it into one sound, and then done EQ on it. I think the main thing from this part really to know is when and how to sample. So I've got all these parts that I've cut up from the instrumental that I knew I wanted in my track, placed it in parts in the arrangement, seeing if it's worked, if it hasn't, moved it, and just experimented that way. Can't really show you how to do that really, but I mean, it's trial and error. It's experimenting, it's creativity. The reason I ended up remixing this song was due to my girlfriend doesn't really listen to dance music. She likes R&B and old soulful kind of stuff. This was a song that kept getting played a lot at the time when we were stuck in lockdown and listening to music and drinking together. We'd listen to R&B, and I thought to myself, I want to remix this. The more I listened to it, the more I was getting ideas on how to tweak it and make it work as a tech house track. So that's kind of where the idea came from for remixing this song. So I already could hear how there's certain parts of the original that I wanted to clip up and rearrange and change. So I had them ideas from the get-go really, and then once I've made my first 8-bar loop, at that point I then took that and arranged it, and then more ideas grew from that. And yeah, that's basically how I sampled the original track and rearranged it and placed it where it needed to be placed. There's also this serum preset, this kind of pluck that's kind of like a ring sound. I don't know why I added that. I just felt like it was a cool idea and it worked. So I can't remember where that idea came from. I think at this point it needed something. The breakdown here, not that one, this one. And I think because I didn't use synths at that point, I was messing around with serum, and then that's just what came about of it. Nothing's even happening, it's not even being EQ'd. Is it being EQ'd in here? Tiny bit. And then music's got just a generic EQ on it that's getting rid of anything below. Is that 200? Yeah, 200 hertz. Because it wasn't needed. And finally we have the effects. Now, I imagine there's barely anything on these. Yeah, kickstart, EQ. I'm very lazy when it comes to EQing effects. What I'm happening on some of these is just kickstart. There's a compressor on this one. Why is there a compressor on this one? Let's hear it. Yeah, just to squish the first part of it. Didn't like how loud it was, so I squish it and then it fades back in. What's happening to you? Nothing. This one's got a bit of EQ on it. I think this one's the pitched one. Yeah. So because it's coming from such a low volume, not low volume, low pitch, I just made sure that none of the low end was coming in. So that's making it go from left to right. And kickstart. Some white noise. Now I do this on tracks sometimes to add some more kind of energy to the very, very high end of the track. So it's almost like a distorted open hat, and I'm panning it from left to right to give it that movement. It's cool on these kind of drops. And then I think this is just a cymbal hit. And then, yeah, a bit more EQ there. And yeah, that's the track. I'm not going to talk about mastering because I didn't actually master this track. One of my producer friends, Kide, I'll link to him in the description, helped me master this. I had a lot of revisions, mainly from him. He's very much wanted this to be perfect, and he would listen to the track and then tell me what was wrong at certain points. So like the kick, like there was certain frequencies in the kick that were causing issues, and the high end hadn't been EQ'd enough and it was resonating frequencies, and so that really helped shape this and get it to where it needed to be featured on Blanc. and then he's then took it and added all the usual processing that you would on your master channel, so your EQs, your compressors, your limiters and all that jazz. And yeah, that's the track. There's not a lot more to talk about. I can quickly run through transitions, any effects that I was doing between certain parts, so let's listen to it here. So that transition is pretty abrupt, but that's what I wanted in this case. So we're using a snare build up, so we're going from very quiet, and then we're cutting the low end of the kick away. We're even then completely getting rid of the kick. The vocal is then used. We drop out all the drums, so the last word of the vocal is the main bit. What is it? Ready to party. So it says party, and then it swoops back into the main drop. We're using the string stab kind of sound, almost like a cymbal hit. So that's why there's very few cymbal hits across the track. The effects. So yeah, the effects there is helping that transition. This one, we've got snare build up, these cymbals are happening. I'll be your naughty girl, I'm calling all my girls. I see you look me up and down in the pink party. Again, this one's quite dry in terms of effects. It didn't need it. I think the vocal carries this track along very well. Just simply dropping stuff out and then bringing it all back in like that is impactful enough. These first few transitions don't really need a lot of work, especially where the vocal is. Let's move on to this one before the breakdown. Again, I'm just dropping out the sound, so like there's no bass and then there's just a kick and a clap. Sorry, just a clap and a hi-hat. That just seems to help it, because at this point everything's going to be a bit more minimal. So we're getting rid of the low end of the kick and the bass. We've got rid of the percussion, got rid of the music percussion bits, so the guitars and whatnot, and then we've got the vocal that's filtered. So it's going from quite full and energetic to practically almost nothing. Of course, that string happening on the one also helps with the down lifter. Breakdown, vocal filter, say this one. Exact same again. This must be the recurring thing throughout the track. So letting that vocal shine through on the last beat, and then just going completely balls to the wall with the drop, letting the kick and the bass and all the other elements just properly be impactful, seems to be the recurring thing in this. We use a drum fill there. And then this one's probably the most effects heavy transition, because we're using Endless Smile to apply reverb to the snare. We're doing some crazy stuff to the vocals. We've got a lot of effects happening on here, so we've got this white noise build up, I believe it is. Oh no, it's like a laser build up, mixed with some sort of pitched riser. We've got a fake drop, the baby bits kind of transitioning this. Yeah, so those are the transitions. I think the main takeaway there is, like, sometimes you don't even need to add stuff. Taking away also can help. Here's a good example where completely getting rid of open hats from playing just so that vocal can shine through. And then once that's got almost like this is the end of the vocal when the drop hits, and it's like you're into the second part of the track. There's also kind of the way part he has said almost feels like there's an effects in that. I think it's a breath, some sort of breath sound happening. That kind of makes it sound as if it's swooshing into that part. And yeah, that's the track. Hopefully I've covered everything that you'd want to know in this. I think for the main thing, like I said earlier, it was the kick and the bass is a very important part, and that comes down to the effects in Sylenth. So if you've got Sylenth, have a play around with that. If not, I'm not sure what to recommend to you really. Get Sylenth. It's a great plugin. I feel like you get a lot more like of an analog feel with Sylenth than you do with Serum. Serum feels quite hard and digital, and Sylenth feels a bit more organic and analog. Yeah, so hopefully you've learned something there. I'd like to thank everyone that's listened and downloaded it. It's done wonders for my socials. Instagram's gone up, I think, ×6 it's gone up. SoundCloud's gone up by ×10. It's over 1,000 followers now. I think before I even made this track I was on 100. So thank you to everyone that's supported the track. Thank you to everyone that's supporting me now, who's listening to my new stuff. And yeah, if you liked what you see today, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything again. The next video, not got anything planned as of yet. I think I might start a new start to finish. If you've got any kind of styles that you might want me to check out, then I'm willing to have a look and see if I can recreate certain things or just have a mess around with that style. EDM is a really big influence to me at the moment, so I might actually try and do something in his style. But yeah, drop me a comment, let me know what you would like to see, if it be in the next video or something you want to see in the future. If there's anything I've not covered here, please ask me a question about it. I'll try and reply as soon as I can. Yeah, thanks for watching guys, and see you next time.